Hello. I wanted to make a video about the lockdowns, and I've been thinking about it, and I figured that there's two basic questions we need to ask about it. One is how much good have the lockdowns done, and the other is how much harm have the lockdowns done, and if they've done more harm than good, then we shouldn't be doing them. And I was trying to figure out, so how would we measure this? What's a good way to measure this? And I can think of like three basic ways. The first is just pure death numbers. How many lives have the lockdowns saved? And how many deaths are the lockdowns going to cause? Um, the other way, a second way, is like an extra way, which is that you actually measure the years of life lost as well. So it makes a difference if a young person dies or an old person dies. It seems to me fair to say that it's more tragic when a young person dies than an old person dies, and you can work out the years of life lost and measure it in that kind of regard. And then a third way is kind of just quality of life, but I'm not sure about this way, and I don't think we even need to go to this one. But the idea that if you save a few lives over here, but it plunges millions of people into poverty over there, is it worth it? Now that's a tricky one. These are all tricky experiments to kind of be playing with, because it's all to do with deaths, and it's it's tricky, and I don't think we need to go to that one. We don't even need to go to the second one, because I've just done some very amateur science here. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a random person trying to get a grasp of how we would answer this question. And yeah, it comes up that the lockdowns are going to cause way more deaths than it will save. So I'm just going to walk you through this study. But I just wanted to say, just to get a gist before I begin, though, it's like trying to visualize this situation. It's very much like we're in a kind of trolley cart, a real life trolley cart experiment. In philosophy, there's the trolley car ethics experiment, where basically you're on a train track, and your train is a runaway train, no brakes, however you want to play it. And there are, in this situation we're in at the moment, there are people on the track ahead of us, and we have another track going off to the left, and we can pull a switch, and there are people on that track as well, and we need to decide, should we pull the switch or not? This is, should we lock down? Should we pull the switch? We need to decide, where are there less deaths? Which is the best one to pull? And the tricky thing about this situation we're in at the moment is that the deaths that are right in front of us, if we do nothing and let our runaway train plough on, these are much more immediate. These are people that are dying right now, and we see it, and they're much more immediate. Whereas the deaths that will be caused by the lockdown are a little bit further off into the distance. We can't quite see it. So the analogy is more like the sidetrack goes through a tunnel, and it's kind of dark, and we've kind of got a rough idea of what's in there. But at the moment, it seems to me this sense that people don't quite. It's hard to quantify the harms of the lockdown. We don't quite know. We can sense that something bad's coming, but we can't quite know why. And then, but the other question is as well, is the lockdowns, how many lives have the lockdowns actually going to save? And so I've put 1 million here. Now I've basically been incredibly generous. I'm going to go through all the data and show you that that's actually, it could be zero. It could be even less. It could be that the lockdowns have even caused more deaths. I'll show you the studies. Let's go through it. So, Ivor Cummings is great. I'll leave all these links below. His videos on YouTube are brilliant, and he's got this resource on his website with just 29 studies now, all basically saying lockdowns don't make much difference. And I'll just go through a few. So this one was from Stanford. It's peer-reviewed. Jay Bhattacharya, John Ioannidis, and their results of their study was that we find no clear significant beneficial effect of the more restrictive non-pharmaceutical interventions, that's basically the lockdowns, on case growth in any country. In France, for example, the effects of more restrictive MPIs was plus 7% when compared with Sweden and plus 13% when compared with South Korea. So they compared countries that used more restrictive measures with countries that didn't, and they found no benefit. Another study here: rapid border closures, full lockdowns, and widespread testing were not associated with COVID-19 mortality per million people. I think that's published in the Lancet, apparently. Another study here: stringency of the measures settled to fight pandemia, including lockdown, did not appear to be linked with death rate. As in, it didn't make any difference to the death rate. It's not linked. Another one: Bristol University, taken together, the results for England and Wales and for Sweden are strongly suggestive that full lockdown may not have been necessary to avoid health service overload, and more limited measures might have been effective. That's that. This one, Leibniz University. In a recent article, Flaxman and al. Alleged that non-pharmaceutical interventions imposed by 11 European countries saved millions of lives. We show that their methods involve circular reasoning. The purported effects are pure artifacts which contradict the data. Moreover, we demonstrate that the United Kingdom's lockdown was both superfluous and ineffective. So that's their results of their study, Leibniz University. Another one: full lockdown policies in Western Europe. Europe countries have no evident impact on the COVID-19 epidemic. There's 29 of these, basically. There's loads. Official data from Germany's RKI agency suggests strongly that the spread of the coronavirus in Germany receded autonomously before any interventions become effective. And if I had more time, I would have done this, but Ivor Cummings' videos, he shows this all the time. He'll put graphs of different countries side by side, and he'll show you where the lockdowns came in, where the lockdowns were lifted, and you just can't see the effect. There's no difference. You go through all the states in America, there's no difference, and in some states it actually looks like you're better off without locking down. But it doesn't seem to be any difference. It's very hard to tell. Some countries no lockdown, some countries that did, and their graphs are basically the same, which suggests there's something else, some other reason causing it, and the lockdowns make no difference. Where we've got some more here. Finally, this is the same study. The ineffectiveness of the MPIs is also supported by empirical studies that determine their effects directly. Recent studies have shown that children are less involved in the transmission of SARS-CoV-2 than adults, suggesting that the closure of schools and kindergartens contributes little to curbing the spread of SARS-CoV-2, and that study has been supported by previous studies. This study, School of Physics and Astronomy, they did a kind of model, and in this model used for Report 9, was independently validated and verified, and predicts that in the absence of an effective vaccine for COVID-19, school closures would result in more overall deaths than no school closures. That's what their model said. Mitigating a COVID-19 epidemic requires a different strategy from an influenza epidemic, with more focus on shielding elderly and vulnerable people. So that's that protect the vulnerable and let everybody else kind of carry on as normal strategy, which has always made sense to me. Just your logic is, if a hurricane comes to America and it heads to Florida, you don't evacuate the whole country, you just evacuate Florida. Even then, you do it voluntarily, and then afterwards, when it's gone through, you ask for voluntary donations from the rest of the country. Please, can you help? But you don't just shut down the entire country. It's just that kind of logic. Wherever the hurricane is hitting, you protect that area. Where if the hurricane's not affecting other people, they shouldn't have to be affected by it, and that they can voluntarily help, and that's nice. That kind of idea seems common sense to me, and that's the idea in the Great Barrington Declaration. That's what they say as well, and that's up to got 13,000 scientists to sign that declaration now. Just seems there's a lot of data, I think. If anybody out there has data, say, that you want to share with me that said lockdowns do work, please feel free to share with me, because I struggled to find any. I couldn't find any, really. So yeah, this is another study. The conclusion: this suggests that the costs of continuing severe restrictions are so great relative to likely benefits in lives saved that a rapid easing of in restrictions is now warranted. So these were cost-benefit analyses, and they use I think this is Imperial College, and it's peer-reviewed as well. This one, they use QALYs, which is quality adjusted life years. So this is the years of life lost. They're taking that into consideration, and they came to the conclusion in a best case scenario, the lockdowns will cost £220,000 per life lost, per QALY, per year of life lost, and that's 7 times the NICE guideline, which is £30,000. The NHS uses that, which is just the figure they've put on it. So it would be 20. That's a best case scenario, 7 times more, and in a worst case scenario, it could cost 3.7 million. That would be needed to justify the continuation of lockdown per QALY. I think that's how it works out. That is, Imperial College, peer-reviewed. I think seems to be Cambridge study. They'd use these QALYs as well. We find that the costs of a 3-month lockdown are likely to have become high relative to benefits, so that a continuation of severe restrictions is unlikely to be warranted. And they did the same thing. So they had these scenarios of coming out of lockdown, and even the worst case scenario of coming out of lockdown was you're still better off than doing it. Israeli study conclusions: a national lockdown has a moderate advantage in saving lives with tremendous costs and possible overwhelming economic effects. And they came to the conclusion of £45 million to prevent 1 case of death was how much it costs. This is the best I could find. A national lockdown has a moderate advantage in saving lives. So they are admitting that it has a moderate advantage in saving lives, but they're just saying that the costs are so overwhelming. That's the best I could find. And then last one, Philip Thomas. He's a professor at Bristol University. He uses a J value, something with cost-benefit analysis, and he came to the conclusion that in UK 560,000 lives would be lost due to the lockdown. About a third of a year per person, which might not sound much, 4 months, but added up comes to 560,000 years of life lost. So 560,000 lives lost, basically. So how many lives have the lockdowns saved? By looking at those studies, it suggests to me, arguably, it averages out at about none. Some say it's worse. A couple said it had moderate advantages. So I don't know. It seems to me like the lockdowns. I really, my honest opinion from everything I've looked at, I don't think lockdowns make any difference. I mean, it seems maybe you want to say it makes a little bit, like a 5-10%. 100,000 deaths, 100,000 lives are saved, maybe something like that, because it makes your instinct. But really, the science doesn't seem to back that up. Anyway, so I've just exaggerated. I've been very, very generous and said, okay, let's just imagine the lockdowns have saved 1 million lives worldwide. Well, let's now turn to the lives that are likely to be lost because of the lockdown. Now, there is a kind of these aren't lost yet kind of part. We're not. There's a future estimation thing going on here, but still, these are very likely. Very likely to lose these lives, I think. So let's go through them. So Ivor Cummings, again, on his website, has a list of the harms of the lockdown. But I found another website called rationalground.com, and they've got a really good comprehensive list of all the harms of the lockdowns here. And just the very first one, very first link, 1.4 million additional tuberculosis deaths due to lockdown disruptions. I mean, I could just end the video now. This is a study, Imperial College, Johns Hopkins University. Seems legit to me. Their worst case scenario is 1.367 million excess deaths, TB deaths. But that's only from a 3-month lockdown and a 10-month recovery. Well, I mean, we've had longer than 3 months, I think, in the UK. It's gone on longer than that, and I think the recovery could be longer than that. So I don't even know if that is a worst case scenario. But anyway, even if you go with that, I basically put into here 1 million. I just put 1 million. I conservative. I rounded it down. So 1 million there. HIV. This is World Health Organization. They predict if a 6-month disruption to antiretroviral therapy could lead to more than 500,000 extra deaths from AIDS-related illnesses, including from TB. So that's I assumed if it's including TB, I rounded it down to 250,000, which again, I'm being generous. It's only 6 months there, could be longer. I feel like that's an underestimation. World Health Organization, malaria deaths, the estimated tally of malaria deaths and stuff would reach 770,000. That's a worst case scenario. Here's the study. Best case scenario 320,000. Worst case scenario 990,000. Actually, if that's 999,000, they said worst case scenario 769,000. Anyway, I've gone to 660,000, so I've gone below even that again, which is, I think, is being generous. That's the average of those two, 660,000. And we could go even lower. We're already way over 1 million. And now this under fives is next, because this is where it seems to make a difference to me. The younger the people who are going to die are, the more of a tragedy it is. UNICEF, 1.2 million under 5 deaths could occur in just 6 months. The analysis estimates that an additional 1.2 million under 5 deaths could occur in just 6 months due to reductions in routine health service coverage levels and an increase in child wasting. And this is a study, it's in the Lancet. Worst case scenario is actually 2.3 million. Best case 500,000. And there are maternal deaths as well involved, 113,000. Worst case 24,000. Best case. So that's I put the average in the middle of that. So I put 1.2 million. That's what they said, 1.2 million. So I put 1.2 million there. Maternal deaths 65,000. The average, rounded it down in the middle. Seems fairly fair, conservative. Hunger deaths, time. It's, there's so many different categories. COVID-19 linked hunger could cause more deaths than the disease itself, new report finds. This is an Oxfam study that suggested that 12,000 deaths per day could occur. That's worst case scenario. 6,000 to 12,000 people per day could die from hunger. This is a World Food Programme study that they got the data from, I think. And so even if I rounded to the middle of that and said 9,000, and then I put 180, which is like 6 months, which again I think is, if that's how many people were dying a day, and that was the rate for 6 months, which I feel like it's probably going to be longer than that. I don't know. That seems again like an underestimation to me. That's 1.6 million. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's always grim just talking about deaths and turning them into numbers. But for the sake of this video, I think I have to do that. These articles are just the numbers of people that are just going to go into poverty. So this would be that third criteria, which I'm not sure we need to go into, but it still kind of makes you think that. So basically, the UN agencies reported that the COVID-19 pandemic could add between 83 million and 132 million people to the already 690 million worldwide who are undernourished. There's more people could go into poverty here. 369 million children across 143 countries who normally rely on school meals for a reliable source of daily nutrition have now been forced to look elsewhere. You could argue that this isn't the lockdown that's doing it. This is other things, but it is the lockdown, isn't it? I mean, the lockdown is what's stunting the economy. It's brought the economy down, and if we hadn't have locked down, yes, there would have still been some resources gone to save and help the vulnerable, but it wouldn't have been anywhere near this. I don't think. So hunger, yeah, and that's just more poverty. And then there's two more. So two more categories. I may have missed some, but this is the cancer deaths, and all the deaths caused from people who've had their appointments at hospitals cancelled. This study, it was an ONS study, and the Daily Mail reporting it. Couldn't find the actual study, but it could kill. They predicted that it could kill 75,000 people over 5 years, and this is just the UK, from missed operations and missed cancer diagnoses. 75,000 deaths, and so basically, if you just assume that that's the same across the world, I mean, America's 5 times this population as us, and if you just take 5 other countries in Europe and assume that they had a similar situation, which seems fair, that's just 10 times the number I put there, 750,000. But if that number is the same across, I mean, India's got 1.4 billion. You know, you can think of the amount of impact over there. You know, again, these seem very conservative numbers. And then deaths of despair are this is another study, the Wellbeing Trust and Robert Graham Centre. These are deaths caused from drug overdose, alcoholism, and suicide from the unemployment and recessions. Predicted best case scenario 27,000, worst case scenario 154,000, in the middle about 68,000. This is America. So if I round that down to like 50,000 and then just multiply it by 5 for the rest of the world, which again just seems very underestimating, but I just multiplied it by 5 for the rest of the world. Actually, well, that could be no, that's probably about right. That's probably underestimating. Yeah, you get the gist. I got to 6 million lives lost from the lockdowns pretty easily. So that's just criteria 1 of just pure lives lost. The lockdowns, lose. But then if you factor in the years of life lost, 10 years of life lost is actually, I think that's quite generous. I think some people have said it's probably nearer 5. Originally, I thought the average age of coronavirus deaths was 82, and about 82, and life expectancy was about 82. So I figured it was not, the average would be no years of life lost. Apparently, it's more like 5 to 10. So anyway, giving it 10,000. But the years of life lost here, I mean, you've got a whole big chunk of under 5s here. Hunger deaths, 10% child. Well, actually, that's just me guessing 10% of those are kids. It probably could be more than that. Again, underestimating. So even if you just say 20 years of life lost average here, which is another underestimate, it just dwarfs it. So that's a very, very unscientific just a study, but it's just, at the same time, I feel like it's fair. I mean, what have I missed there? You could argue that the lockdowns themselves, I think the lockdowns are the main cause of that, but you could argue that there'd still be destruction even from all the resources, even if we hadn't locked down. But it seems to me like the lockdowns are the main culprit. That's having the biggest amount of destruction. Yeah, and I don't know, you might be able to argue some other things. There could be some other reasons to not connect these things together, but it seems to me like the costs of lockdown are way higher than the amount of good that lockdowns are going to do. So that's it. Yeah. Was there something I was going to say about the train, the trolley cart? I think I'll leave it there. Okay. That's all. Bye bye.